Okay, I think we're ready to start. Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're hearing this and seeing this from. And welcome to EduX, the world's biggest free online study abroad fair. My name is Ricardo. Today, I'm going to be doing a quick CV clinic, a workshop, if you will, on how to build your international resume. We all know how important it is today to have an international career with how global the world is today. So hopefully this session is going to help you either launch that international career with that CV or help you get to the next step in your international career. Before we do that, just a very quick intro, quick slide on who I am. As I said, my name is Ricardo. I am Tactical Director for EF Italy. I'm originally from Venezuela. I've been working with EF now for over 10 years. Started my career with EF in London. Before that, lived in the United States and in different cities for my bachelor's. For my bachelor degree. In London, I did my master's studies with Holt International Business School, and then started working with EF London immediately after graduating from Holt. After London, I moved to Switzerland, first in a small town called Luzern, then afterwards to Zurich. Then after that, spent a couple of years in EF Rome, and now I'm currently in Milan. So those blue dots there that you see in that slide is it's a bit of a summary, if you will, of my international experience so far. These are places where I have lived, I have been based in, or where I have had teams based. So I was traveling quite often to these places. So I have experience in the Americas, in Europe, in Asia, and also in Dubai. I speak 3 languages, so English, obviously, Spanish. Spanish is my mother tongue, and now also Italian. Yeah. So that's a brief summary of my international experience. So now let's go ahead and start talking about how can you build this international CV to help you launch that international career. So just a very brief agenda. We have 6 points here. So we're going to go through them, of course, a little bit more in detail. So make time and get inspired, how to know your audience before you start building your CV, be aware of the market that you're applying for, a bit on the recruiter brain or the recruiter mind, some CV examples that I personally like, that are all quite different and hopefully will inspire you a bit to draft your own version. And then last but not least, the online presence, your online presence. So we're going to go a little bit in depth into that as well. So point number 1, so make time and get inspired. This is very important. The reality is that we are all very busy with our everyday tasks. It's definitely not easy to make time to work on our CV. That's the reality. Finding time and finding the inspiration to work on the resume and potentially even the cover letter can be hard, can be tough, especially because there's generally not a deadline, right? There's nobody necessarily pushing you to finish this document. However, I say this over and over, building a CV really from scratch, it's always good practice, either because you're looking for a new job or even if you're in a job already, it is good practice. It's always going to lead to a positive end. So why is that? So there's 3 main, I would say, obvious points to this. Okay, so point number 1, of course, if you are looking to land that first job, that initial impression that you're going to make thanks to this CV is going to be your key to that door. It's going to be the first step that you need to take to land that first job. Or you already have a job, but you want to get a better job. You want a higher paying job, you want to get a promotion, or maybe you want to jump industries. Maybe you want to just simply jump to a different company, a different role. So in order to find that better role, it's important that you have a very solid, very, very good CV to back that up, right? Or maybe you're in group number 3 here, where you're not necessarily looking to make a change. You're happy in the position and company that you're working for, but just going through those past experiences, looking at all those past successes that have led you to where you are now, that is going to boost your self-confidence in your current job, and it's just going to make you even go to the next level because of that confidence. So really going through that exercise, I believe it's always a positive things anyway. So these are 3, I think, very powerful benefits of why it's important to have the document itself, the CV, the resume. So now that you're convinced that it's important to have one, or important to refresh the one that you currently have, let's get into some tips on how you should build this CV, how we should build this document. So knowing your audience is, of course, key. Yeah, when preparing your CV and your cover letter, it's important to think who's going to be reading it, who's going to be reading this document. Obviously, it's going to be recruiters. Recruiters are putting these ads for the jobs that you're applying to. So one thing that you need to think about is that many recruiters receive more than 100 CVs per day. Yeah, so they need to be very fast in how they evaluate candidates. So really think about that. The document that you have really needs to stand out in order to grab the attention of the recruiter. Now, you want to make sure that the recruiter really sees this document and is wowed immediately. Okay, you need to make sure that you're making an impression really within the first seconds of them seeing that CV, because as I said, and I'll show you a little bit later, you have a very, very short time span to prove or to show who you are with this document. Okay, so how can we do that? How can we get that wow factor? How can we make it pop? We're going to go through that, of course, in more detail as well. One thing that we always recommend, one thing that you can do is you can always hand your CV to a friend and just ask them to spend a couple of minutes reading it. And then ask them to tell you what are the top 3 things that come to mind, what are the things that stood out. And you'll be surprised if, a lot of the cases, what they tell you, what are the top 3 things, are not what you thought were the top 3 things. So it makes you think, well, why is that? What are they seeing first that I'm potentially not seeing in my own CV, right? So just to put it in perspective of these CVs that are seeing so many documents, so many CVs per day, how important it is to really customize the document in order to wow them from the get-go. Okay. So how can we customize the CV? So one of the things that recruiters absolutely hate is to receive a document that they know for a fact you have used in over 100 companies. Something that is generic, that you have been just using and using and using without editing anything, and just applying to many different companies, many different roles without changing a single word in your CV. This is something that they can spot a mile away. They can see this immediately. And they don't like it, right? And justly so, right? Because they want to make sure that you're taking the time to hand in a document, hand in a CV that is speaking to them and to that particular role that you're applying to specifically. So how do you achieve that? Point number 1, you need to make sure that you're taking time to read about the company. So really check their mission statement. What are they all about? What is their company culture? Really only by knowing the company are you going to be able to position yourself and market yourself appropriately for that company. Otherwise, it's quite difficult if you don't know much about the company or know very basic superficial things. So do your homework, get to know and read about the company first. Okay. Then important to use strategic keywords that lets the recruiter know immediately that you know the lingo, you know the terminology of the industry, of the company. It shows that you have done your homework, you have done your research, and you have really invested time to understand a little bit why this company is a good fit for you and why you're a good fit for this company. Absolutely important to keep that in mind. Another very important thing to keep in mind is that you need to have a proper structure, right? The structure of the resume will determine how easy it is for a recruiter to find the information that they're looking for. So if you make the CV, if you make the resume overly complicated, it's too text heavy. As a recruiter, they're just ultimately going to get frustrated and they're just going to, they're not going to spend time trying to find the information. They're just going to throw it to the side, and you don't want that, right? That's not making the impact that you want at all. So it's important that you consider visually how you structure this document. So these are just 6 points that I think are very basic, very important when structuring your CV. Obviously, your education, your experience, depending on where you live or where you're applying to, experience might go on top and education go on bottom, but both points, of course, are basic and fundamental in a CV. Your personal information, the skills that you have, both hard skills and soft skills, achievements that you're proud of, and also personal interest that speaks a little bit more who you are as a person also outside of your job. But again, in a very structured manner, very clear, very systematic. You don't want to put it out. You don't want to put it out a document that just makes it look like you are disorganized, or maybe that you don't have your ideas clearly present in your head just because of a document that is not well formatted and properly structured. Yeah, so very important. Some tips on how to achieve this. So first and foremost, it's important to keep the CV short. We need to make sure that you're as much as possible trying to keep this within 1 page, right? And a lot of people think that this is too short. In reality, if you are 35, 36-year-old, around that range, you should be able to fit all of your experience in 1 page. Okay. If you can't, you really need to think how you're wording and what you're really putting in that CV. Maybe you have way more experience. You're older than 35. You've held many positions that you just cannot fit in 1 page. That is also, of course, valid, and it happens. In that case, it's always recommended that you have 2 versions. You have your 1-pager that goes really, really in a very summarized. It goes in a very summarized fashion, and you have another document that is maximum 3 pages in length. But again, the more that you can keep it in 1 page, the better. There's a very famous CV in the internet, Elon Musk's, the CEO of Tesla, and he has achieved so much with all of the company that he's involved in, not only Tesla but the Boring company. And even him, with his experience, he's able to fit everything in a very systematic and structured way in 1 page. So if he's able to do that, I'm pretty sure that you and I were able to do that as well in 1 page. Now, reverse, what does this mean? So remember to list everything in reverse order, meaning you want to have the most recent and the most relevant aspects of your CV on top. Okay, we're going to go into details why that is, but the obvious option is that is the first thing that the recruiter sees, the top part of your CV. So you want to make sure that you're listing, again, the most relevant and the most recent things always first and on top, and then work your way down. When it comes to the company that you are applying for, or sorry, the companies that you have worked in, if you haven't worked for a big brand and very known brand, such as Google, for example, you want to make sure that you're adding a line, as a very brief sentence description of what this company is all about or what they do. You don't want the recruiter wasting time searching online as to what this company is. Okay, you want them spending that time actually going through your skills and your CV. So a one-liner, very simple sentence description, really is all you need to describe the company that you're working for, or the companies that you have worked for. Again, keep it short. Just 2 or 3 lines per company is what is needed, absolutely not more. If you haven't moved too much within different companies, you've stayed mostly within one company, but have had different position, different promotion, internal promotions, it's important that you make it clear that you are not hopping from one position to another, right? You want to make sure that it's a clear path of promotion or lateral movements within that company. Okay, so that is something that is part of the structure that you need to think about. And of course, the dates, you want to make sure that the dates are clear. We want to be able to see, to clearly see your moves, how long you spent in each role. All right. So short, reverse, dates, company descriptions, and keep in mind if it's internal promotions. Stay focused and have clear achievements, right? So the more you focus, the more exposure you can give to relevant parts of your experience, okay? So this goes back to the point of making sure that you're putting in your CV really the most relevant aspects, not only of your experience, but what is more relevant for the job that you're applying to, right? So anything that is irrelevant for that role, again, it could be super relevant, it could be something you're very proud of, but if it's irrelevant to the role that you're applying to, then you can really just throw that out the window and give that space to the things that are going to be more important towards that particular role that you're applying to. So make sure that you're focusing on what the recruiter is looking for, what the job requires, what you can bring to the role, what are the experiences and skills, and obviously the ultimate, let's say, the knowledge that you can bring in order to fulfill that role successfully. Yeah. Be relevant. One thing that we always say is that you need to note very clearly your achievements, right? So applicants should always include goals that they have met and presented in the previous jobs. So, for example, if you're a salesperson, you want to make sure that you're including examples of, you want to put numbers, figures on how much you sold, how much revenue or profit you brought into your company. And this is always good because it shows the recruiter or even the hiring manager that this person is result driven, they understand their KPIs, they have a clear focus, and again, it's relevant to the sales position that they're applying for, right, in this example. And again, if you're applying to any sort of, in this example, a marketing role, make sure that the KPIs, the number, the figures that you are including in that description are relevant for the role that you're applying to. So always make sure that you're keeping it relevant. Also, in the realm of being relevant, you need to think about your skills, right? So a recruiter wants to know your skills, especially those relevant for the job that you are applying for. Okay, so let's say that you're applying for a very technical role. So then it makes sense that you put a list of all of these hard skills maybe separately, so they can see at a glance that you do have those hard skills. So let's say that you are proficient in Photoshop, right? Or HTML, or any type of coding, Adobe. So anything that is hard skill that you think is relevant, absolutely make a list there. When talking about soft skills, if you're referring soft skills, then we don't necessarily need to include a list, right? Because the reason is really anyone can put a random list of soft skill. I'm a strong communicator. I'm a great presenter. These are things that anybody can really include in a list, in a CV. But if you cannot really back it up, and it's not you cannot back it up in the CV. I mean, it's not necessarily relevant. So again, it's all about how relevant this is. So in a minute, we're going to take a deeper look into this, but before that, just a couple of other tips. Don't include a skill that is given, that is granted, it's given for granted. For example, Excel is a very famous one. Depending on the role that you're applying to, Excel, let's say you're applying for a sales management role, using Excel is almost a given. So unless you're a macro genius, there's not a need to put I'm proficient in Excel. Okay, this is taken as a granted. If you have a language skill or a set of language skills, that is absolutely something that you can and should put and list in your CV. However, make sure that you're making you're also including the reference, a standardized reference like the EF set or the CEFR, just as an example. Another example is maybe you have team management skills. Maybe you've led many teams or big teams, international teams, and so on. This is good to put, but don't put a very generic team management in one bullet point. This is very generic and not necessarily relevant. But you want to include how many people did you manage, for how long, were you involved in the recruitment, were you involved in training, what did you achieve with your team? So these are things always to keep in mind when thinking about this particular point. Again, many candidates make this mistake of just putting a random set of skills to impress recruiters. However, if it's not something that it falls within the context of the role, it's not something that you can necessarily back up with in your CV, then it's not it's something that really becomes less relevant as everybody's doing it. So it's something that you can skip and only focus on the things that are really going to add that wow factor to your document. Check the spelling. This is something that unfortunately is the quickest way to get a rejection from a recruiter, is a spelling mistake. And it's really a shame because you spend a lot of time building a great CV and it just takes one word to throw off completely a recruiter to think this person is not capable just because of a grammatical mistake. So make sure that you're reviewing the application several times, but beyond that, it's important that you're giving the CV to somebody. Give it to a friend, a family member, your spouse, your girlfriend or boyfriend. Make sure that they're reading it because once it does happen that you read your CV so many times that you become blind to the mistakes, right? It's a mind trick that your brain does at times. So having a second person read it, that is always a good that is always good practice. And if it comes if you need to translate your CV, so you need to write it in a language that is not your first language or a language you're necessarily proficient in, do not rely on Google Translate. Google Translate is a fantastic tool for everyday, certain words. If you cannot find a specific how to say a specific sentence, but writing a full document relying on Google Translate is a recipe for disaster. So do spend some extra time to find somebody that speaks the language that can help you write the CV or check the CV in that language. So again, do not rely on Google Translate for this example. So let's come back to the design. We talked a little bit about the structure. There's always a discussion of Word or PDF. We generally recommend that when you're sending the documents, you're sending it as a PDF. And one thing that we like to see is that people go the extra mile to submit something that is different. It's very simple. Even if you go to Word and you look at templates, you're going to find at least 3-4 generic templates on writing a CV that you can fill out in 3 minutes. Okay. That is not necessarily advised. That's not going to make you stand out at all. Quite the opposite. So you want to make sure that you find a design, you find a template or build a template that is going to impress the recruiter, but at the same time, it's going to put across your personality. Okay, so we're going to go through some examples in a minute. This is just one. One thing here, one point or one tip is don't be afraid to be innovative. Yeah, if you want to have something that is visually interesting, like this example here, I mean, you see there's a lot of use of different graphics. You're using specific charts maybe to note your language proficiency. Instead of just writing it, that you see a very nice graph. It's visually engaging. It makes you want to stay in the CV and explore a little bit further. It could be, in some cases, easier to understand than just a clunk of text. And another nice thing about this CV is that this particular example, Diana, she includes her social media accounts, which it's always a plus because recruiters, before they're inviting you for an interview, most probably beyond your CV, they're going to search you for sure in LinkedIn and potentially in other platforms. So it's important that, if you're giving it very easy to them, that they can just click and see, even if you have a private account, they can see your Facebook picture, they can see your Instagram profile picture, they can of course see your LinkedIn account, and seeing how that matches with your CV. So making sure that you're keeping social media in mind, it's always a good thing. That's something that we're going to talk to more towards the end of this presentation, but just something to keep in mind already. Make it personal and make it interesting. As I said, don't be afraid to make your CV reflect your personality. Okay, you need to make sure that it's something that it's going to make you stand out from the pack. As I said earlier, CVs, recruiters are looking literally at hundreds of CVs per day. So you need to make sure that it's something that says, okay, this is me, this is Ricardo, this is how I'm different to the hundreds of CV that this person has in front of them. They want to know for sure about you, right? For you in terms of beyond you and work, but you as a person, as a whole. So it can be your interest, right? But it can be also interesting for them what you have done abroad. maybe a period, something that you did when you had some time off. Maybe you did some traveling, right? Maybe you fulfilled a lifelong dream. Maybe you did this very impressive adventure. That is something always that if you can include it, I think it's very appreciated. Again, it needs to be an exciting fact about yourself, not the very generic. Oh, I like movies, I like books, I like going out with my friends. Everybody likes that. Everybody does that. So you need to make sure what can I include that is it speaks about me specifically. It's not something just very generic. So add something exciting, an exciting fact about yourself. That is always a good thing. Things to avoid. Think that some things to keep in mind here. Important to have an appropriate profile picture. Okay, and depending on where you're applying to, CVs might have pictures, might not have pictures. We're going to go into that as well in a second. But if it does have a picture, make sure that you have a professional, appropriate picture. It can be something that is portraying your personality. It doesn't have to be a super boring, generic, black and white, professional type picture. But you don't also want to go on the other end, right? You don't want to be too informal. You don't want to be too sexy or too formal. You want to make sure that you're smiling, that you're natural, that you're dressed professionally. That is something that I just like to say, because I personally have seen CVs that potentially are good, but the CV, the picture just completely throws you off because it's way too out there, right? When thinking about the text itself, so what you're writing in the CV, you want to make sure that you're objective when describing yourself. And by objective, I mean that you are sticking to facts, right? You don't want to just put, this is my opinion of me. You want to make sure that you have facts that can back up, this is the experience that I had in this specific place at this particular time. This was the outcome. Yeah, this was the outcome of this goal. So always be objective. Don't list irrelevant experiences. Again, they might be relevant to you. They might be even relevant in the grand context of your experience. But if they're not relevant to the position that you're applying to, you don't need to add it. Okay. We also mentioned there's no need to have a very long CV, so I'm not going to get into that again. And please make sure not to add fake experiences. I mean, this is for me it's obvious, but I like to include it because it's not professional, it's not ethical, and ultimately it can mean losing your job afterwards if they find out that you completely lied through your CV. So just stick to the truth. That's always the best tip. The cover letter is always a big question. There are mixed opinions about the cover letters. Some recruiters bother to look at it, others not necessarily. But I think, personally, I think that the cover letter can add an extra positive layer. It doesn't hurt, right? So if you can add something that is, again, even here, you should think about adding something that is short, 10 lines maximum, I would say. You want to make sure that the cover letter is relevant to the CV, but it's not repetitive, right? It needs to add something different. If not, there's not a lot of sense in even having a cover letter. So think about it. The cover letter should ultimately just provide a little bit more information about yourself, about the position that you're applying, and why you think that you are the right person for that role. It doesn't have to be a super long essay that most probably they're not going to be reading. Okay. Important in the cover letter, of course, remember to always include the title to the job that you're applying to. Sometimes people forget that recruiters are they have 50, 70 different job ads at the same time. So important to include the job title that you're applying for. All right, so moving on to the next point, which is being aware of the market. We briefly touched on this in the beginning. So every country or maybe every region has something very particular that it's important to keep in mind when applying for a role, when writing your CV. Just to give you a couple of examples, let's say in the UK. In the UK, picture is actually not required. As it actually could potentially encourage discrimination. So for the same reason, there's no need to specify age or gender or marital status. That is something maybe very UK specific. Other countries I know are very similar in that regard. In Italy, for example, you sign putting the first name and then the last name, or then the surname. So, I mean, this is just a small pause to remember that the CV formatting, the CV, even the structure of the CV can vary depending on the country that you're applying to. So keep that in mind, depending on where you're listening from, France, Asia, or the Americas. So keep in mind where you're applying and what kind of differences you potentially need to make in your CV in order to make it more relevant to that region or to that country. Now, I wanted to talk also briefly about the recruiter brain or the recruiter mind. This platform that you have here in front of you, just one of many platforms that recruiters use to check CVs. So basically, once you apply, the CVs land in a specific platform, and recruiters use this to go through them, right? To check the CVs that are coming for a specific position. As you can see here, this is just one job ad, one job opening. It has over 200 applications. So you need to make sure that whatever you're doing, you're catching the attention of the recruiter immediately, right? If you're a recruiter, if you're looking at 100 CVs per day as a minimum, you need to have a fast process to say, this is a good match, this is not a good match. If not, it's not humanly possible. So remember, recruiters are very busy people. So we need to make sure that we're accommodating as much as possible the CV and the structure for them to find what they need to find relevant very quickly. Okay, so there's this study. It generally takes a recruiter up to 6 seconds to see if that CV is a good fit or not. 6 seconds. Okay, so this image that you have here in the screen is a study which was using an eye tracking technology. Which can measure exactly where the recruiter's eyes looked and how long they stayed on a specific point. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the super technical aspects of the neuroscience or the technical aspects of this study, but you can see here they spent 80% of their review on 6 key elements ultimately when looking at the CV. Okay, they're looking at the name. Right? They're looking at the current experience. They're looking at the past experience. So current company and previous company you worked at. They're looking at dates and they're looking at the educational background. These are, let's say, the parts of the CV that carry the most weight visually for recruiters. Okay, so of course, experiences abroad, languages, goal achievements, keywords. They're all positive, something that you should, as we said, include and have. But those 6 seconds, they're looking for those 6 elements that we mentioned above. So again, your name, current and previous company you worked at, the dates, and your educational background. Okay. So also one thing that we can see in this image is where the eye naturally falls. So we can see that it's not necessarily going through the whole thing. Actually, it's very clear where the eye is going. In this case, it's staying on the top of the page. The eye naturally falls on the top of the page. So this is why you need to be very strategic about what you put. Yeah. If you put too much information that at the end the recruiter is not going to look at, if the good information, the relevant information that you have is hidden in text that they're never going to get to, like in the bottom or the middle of the page, then unfortunately you miss an opportunity to really show what you wanted to show. Okay, so always important to think about where you're placing the most important part of your experience and where you're trying to put across, which is, as we said, on top. So again, part of this study, so looking at what is more important to recruiters, what is less important to recruiters. So this is just a quick chart showing percent of recruiters who care. So what are recruiters looking for, or what do they care about when looking into CVs? So we said grammatical errors, having typos, that is something that, that there's the high percentage there. So we need to be careful with those. You want to include your achievements. You want to always use professional tone in your CV. This is going back to the picture, but the tone of also the text should be very professional. Be specific in your responsibilities. listing all job titles at the company. That's important. Using keywords. So we mentioned that before, using strategic keywords during in your CV. The formatting. So this is going back into the structure, the design of the CV, the formatting and the font, right? Some things that are less important or not so important. So big example, volunteering experience. Volunteering experience is, of course, is a positive thing. Is it something that recruiters are focusing on when making a selection? Not necessarily. So I'm not going to go through the whole list there. You can see them, but just to keep in mind, what are the big things that recruiters are seeing? So experience, the education, making sure that your contact information is always on top, easy to find for them. That is always a big plus. I wanted to also show you some CV examples, which I hope they inspire you when we finish this presentation to build your new CV or to refresh your current CV. Um, this is an example I like. Okay, so this is for me a great CV. Why? So we talked about structure. You can see in the CV, it's very structured, it's very clean, right? It's very visually pleasing. The picture very standard, very professional. You can see the points are very clear, very easy to read. The design itself is very minimalistic, very linear. That is something that I personally like. I also like, for example, a creative CV, right? Depending on the position that you're applying to, for sure, if you're applying to a creative sort of role, having a creative CV, I think it's even a bigger plus. But from if starting from the one on the right part of the screen, you can see here this is a graphic designer. So a graphic designer, of course, important that they have a super graphic creative CV. You can see different types of shards, different type of flows. It just engages your attention, and you want to look a little bit more about who is this Paolo Estriga, right? What is his experience? What is this chart all about? It makes you curious, and it ultimately makes you go a little bit more in depth into the CV. The other ones very much within the same lines, but all very different formatting, very different design, but always very creative, but at the same time clean, very linear, easy to read, with very nice graph and examples to back up the experience. Okay. Very different, but also very valid are the formal CV. So here you have something, on the left side, something that is very, very minimal, very clean, very basic. The one on the right, similar with maybe a touch of color, but also very simplistic and formal CV, very classic CV, if you will. I'm not saying that this one is better than the other one or the other one is better than this one. They're just completely different styles, right? So if you are applying for, if you're a marketer, you're a creative person, you have this type of role, you're applying to this type of role, maybe you want to use a CV that is closer to this, right? If you are, by nature more formal, more minimalistic, straight to the point kind of person, then this might be the type of CV that you're going to use or template that you're going to use. Both are fine. Just make sure something that is reflecting really who you are. Video presentation. This is something that we see a lot. Here are just a few more examples of other websites where you can create your online profile and then your CV. You literally just have to fill the information, and then the site creates the visuals for you. So it's something very, very convenient. This is just this Do You Buzz. This is just one of many websites that you can find online. Just to wrap it up, so when talking about your CV, it's important to talk about the full package. So we spoke your CV and your resume, your cover letter. It's always also important to think about your online presence, right? So basically, the CV and the cover letter is part of your personal brand, ultimately. So is your online presence. So the platforms in which you are present, LinkedIn, of course, that's a big one when it comes um, to job seeking, of course. So make sure that your CV, anything that you have in your CV, is aligned and it's similar in terms of the experience, in terms of your information that you have, same as what you have in LinkedIn. If it's completely different, obviously it doesn't make sense. And you can always stay active in these platforms, right? So if you're looking for a job, If you're following specific companies, you're posting, you're being very active on social media, again, LinkedIn being the biggest platform for this specific purpose, that is always a positive thing. So beware what you post, beware of the profile pictures that you have. LinkedIn is always, of course, known as the most, let's say, professional platform. But if you have, a Facebook account, an Instagram account, always keep in mind that anybody can easily type your name or your email, and they can find you if you have an account. So you don't want to have a profile pic that is just going to throw the recruiter off because it's too out there, it's too unprofessional. So it's fine, of course, if it's your personal account, you want to have something quirky, that's absolutely fine, as long as it's not something that is going to ultimately turn off the recruiters, right? So let's just put it that way. I wanted to finish with this. This is also in the points of your online presence. In LinkedIn, there's the ability for you to upload different certificates. If you don't have an English or language certificate already, just want to let you know that in EF we do have a free English test, which is the EF set. You've probably heard of it. If you just go to www.fset.org, you can take a test in 50 minutes. You can get your personalized EF set certificate, which you can then post and add to your LinkedIn profile, which is always a very nice add-on. Again, if you don't have something of the sort already, I think this can be very useful. You can get immediate analysis of your reading, on your listening, and the results, of course, are aligned with CEFR. Okay, so if you don't have that, absolutely check it out. And that is pretty much it for me. I hope that you found this information or this workshop interesting and useful. And I want to wish all of you really good luck in your international careers. And if you're exploring other chats, other webinars in EduX, I wish you well in that journey as well. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.